So thank you all for joining us today. My name is Andrea English, and I'll be chairing the talk today. We're very excited to present our fifth talk in our virtual visiting speaker series on decolonizing the curriculum in higher education. The topic of decolonizing the curriculum is gaining increasing attention worldwide. Research in this area is driving HE teachers and students to reconsider what is taught and how it is taught, and it is also impacting HE policy discourse. In this series, we've invited speakers who can help us collectively reflect on the meaning of decolonization and in turn inspire us and aid our existing efforts to make changes in our own educational contexts. It's my true honor to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Jason Arday. Dr. Arday is an associate professor of sociology at Durham University in the Department of Sociology. He's also the Deputy Executive Dean for People and Culture in the Faculty of Social Science and Health. He's also a visiting research fellow at The Ohio State University in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and an adjunct professor at Nelson Mandela University in the Center for Critical Studies in Higher Education Transformation. He's also a trustee of Runnymede Trust, the UK's leading race equality think tank. Jason is the author of a few books, including Considering Racialized Contexts in Education, Using Reflective Practice and Peer Mentoring to Support Black and Ethnic Minority Educators, which is on Routledge, and also Being Young, Black and Male, Challenging the Dominant Discourse, which is on Palgrave. He's the co-editor of the highly acclaimed Dismantling Race in Higher Education, Racism, Whiteness, and Decolonizing the Academy. And he also serves on the editorial boards of Educational Philosophy and Theory and the British Sociological Association journal, Sociology. He has a list of several chapters, book chapters, articles around the topic today of decolonization and related topics. I recommend looking at his website. And it includes these forthcoming book chapters, Decolonizing Higher Learning Education in the UK, which will appear in A World History of Sociology, and also Walls Can Come Tumbling Down, Negotiating Normative Whiteness, Racial Microaggressions, and Black and Minority Ethnic Mental Health Within the Academy, which will be in the Routledge Handbook of Critical Race and Whiteness Studies. So really exciting work, and I know that we're all looking forward to reading more of it, and thank you so much for coming. His talk today is entitled Still a Lot to Do, Disrupting Racism in the Academy. So I'll hand it over to you, Jason.
Hi, thank you so much, Andrea and Pauline as well, and everyone who's put this together. First and foremost, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone keeping? I hope you're all well and surviving. It's an absolute privilege to be here. Kind of as I always say, it's not lost on me that it is coming up to 1:10 on a Thursday afternoon when people are really busy and probably quite beleaguered, as it's been a really difficult, challenging academic year. So the fact you've taken the time to be here right now today, it really means a lot to me, and I'm really mindful that I kind of want to hear what everyone thinks on this topic. So I'm not going to talk for really any more than 20 minutes, maybe a little bit less, because I'm really intrigued to hear what other people think. So I mean, it's been a tumultuous year, I guess, for many reasons. The pandemic, I guess, from a race politics point of view, the murder of George Floyd has kind of really rubber stamped racism and how it pervades and how it works through our varying institutions and kind of discriminatory pillars. It's kind of come to the fore. So we've had this situation where race has historically always resided on the periphery, and now it occupies a place in the societal and political center. And it never occupies that space for long, but there's something about this that's become really tangible. And when we think of higher education in particular, what we have are the numbers. Now, I myself, as I've said many times, I don't have a benign obsession with numbers. but it's not a bad instrument to use to illustrate the contours of the problems we're facing, you know, to give a body to the problems we're facing. You know, we have over 20,000 professors in higher education in the UK. Just over 15,500 are white male, just over 5,000 are white female, and we have 35 and counting black female professors, and we have about 118 black male professors as of 2020. So we're still 1% or less than 1% of the professoriate are black. And what we're seeing really is a paucity of numbers. And then when we kind of delve a lot deeper into that, we kind of think, well, what are the severs in the pipeline? Why is there such a dearth of numbers? And when we look at the pipeline into academia, we then kind of delve a little bit further. And you know, just under half, of the student population as of 2019 are from a black minority ethnic background. So that's quite a considerable number. And just under half of that half will go into postgraduate study, but we're not seeing that funneled through into PGR study and going through into academia. And so there's a real disconnect there as to why that's happening. And we have further kind of illustrative narratives that kind of point towards why this may be. So in the work done, I was a co-author with, the work led by Paulette Williams in terms of Leading Roots, and Suki Barth and Chantel Lewis. The research that we conducted found that well over 15,500 PhD studentships were awarded, and only 30 were awarded to Black Caribbean students, despite you know, burgeoning numbers of Black and ethnic minority students applying for PhD studentships over the last 5 years in the UK. So when you kind of put all of those kind of figures together, it paints a very difficult picture. And if we kind of reside in some of the smaller victories we've had in higher education, for example, slight shifts of momentum in terms of when we think of decolonising, for example, you know, a general push towards universities analysing their, I guess, cultures, and then thinking about anti-racism. We have seen some kind of small movement, but those small movements really pivot away from the issues at hand, which is why I say we still have a lot to do. There's still a dearth of Black and ethnic minority leaders when we look at leadership tiers. There are still a dearth of young Black and ethnic minority academics coming into the sector, both in terms of academic and professional services. And I guess the question is why? Why does that keep on happening? So we kind of need to really think about the institutional aspect of this and the sector as a whole. So generally speaking, there is a lot to suggest that a lot of race equality interventions are not enshrined or crystallized or embedded within university strategic aims, which makes it very difficult, because from a human resource and a fiscal point of view, these are not sustained. What these interventions become are really patchwork interventions, which really hide behind the veneer of presenting as though universities are becoming anti-racist and engaging in anti-racist dialogue, but in fact, it's a lot of it's posturing. It's playing to the gallery, so to speak. It's advertising what we're doing as an institution, but then when you delve more into it, who's actually mobilizing that work? And more often than not, it is the few Black and ethnic minority people that reside within the sector, often unremunerated. It's not accredited to or aligned with career progression, and it's not recognized in terms of becoming mobile in terms of career or upward or career trajectories. And to add to that burden specifically, for being absolutely candid and honest, it falls upon Black and ethnic minority women. So there is a huge kind of paucity and deficit approach that's happening here, and it kind of really lends itself to the idea that we all need to remain vigilant and agile when we're discussing aspects of race and race equality. I think our worst enemy is complacency, And I think for us to think for 1 second that you know, we're making gains and actually we can rest upon our laurels, I think that is something that we can't afford to do. And we can't afford to do that because to trace the contours of racism, to stay abreast of racism, it's very difficult. It's able to manifest itself in many different forms. And in terms of those many different forms, one of the things that is really impactful about that is that, you know, a lot of these different forms of whiteness, a lot of these really different forms of racism come through different manifestations of whiteness. And when I say that specifically, what I speak to is that there are several instruments of whiteness, one being the racial microaggression, and how that is utilized in a very subtle way, but it's been utilized in such a way that there are always reinventions of how the racial microaggression can be used as a form of subordination, subjectification, objectification, and marginalization. So there's always a questioning of capabilities around that we kind of really need to forensically interrogate. And so I suppose moving forward, one of the things that we kind of need to really think about is what has happened that we can build on. What are the seeds that we have planted? Having now unearthed this, I guess you could say, toxic soil, you know, that there's been a lot of kind of digging to kind of remove this toxic soil within higher education. And it's become really exacerbated over the last 3 or 4 years, but definitely more so over the last year or so. If we're looking to plant fertile soil and we're looking to kind of nourish these seeds of hope and these seeds of you know, anti-racism within the academy, what might that look like? Now, what it really involves from my perspective, and in the research I've done, is a collective responsibility. So the one thing that I always found intriguing was this idea that Black and ethnic minority people never asked to encounter racism, but yet it's always been at their gift somehow, without the autonomy or the power, in many cases, to extricate themselves from that situation, when it's really a cousin or a relative of whiteness, when we think or white supremacy to be specific. So the burden of that does need to be collated by as many people as possible. We need to think about how we better center Black and ethnic minority voices. We need to think about how we conceptualize white allyship in light of what's happened in the last year. I think there's a tolerance that's required. There's a need to center also Black and ethnic minority voices and empower them, and to be able to empower them in safe spaces that recognize that actually sometimes those spaces have been complicit in creating a racially hostile environment. I think one of the things that really resonates with me is this collective consensus. There is a growing critical mass of people that are really forming a rearguard action in terms of what we want our university to look like, in terms of being an anti-racist institution. Universities are a microcosm of society. In many respects, they're a reflection of society, and very often it's, you know, it's supposed to endorse all the kind of egalitarian ideals that we all embrace from a social justice perspective across the intersection, generally speaking. But I think the most important thing really is to focus on, if universities are supposed to be a microcosm of society, when we look at our own institutions, are those institutions reflective of a multicultural and multi-ethnic society? When we think about the instruments we use to transfer knowledge, is that knowledge representative or reflective of all people that reside in that space? If the idea of education is to prepare people to take their place within a global, ethnically diverse society, are we equipping students, people who traverse the academy, are we equipping them with the tools to be able to flourish in a multi-ethnic society? At the moment, there's a lot to suggest that we're not, because, you know, our curriculum is still quite a heavily white Eurocentric curriculum, and we do engage in this kind of toxic amnesia, or selective amnesia, at least at best, where we engage in this, I guess, toxic nostalgia, you know, in terms of the empire, what it could be. You know, we present Black and ethnic minority and Indigenous people as subordinated, rather than talking about their contribution to modern society, and really thinking about how they've been emancipatory and influential in ways that move away from enslavement. So there's kind of lots of things that we still need to do, and we need to remain kind of agile to the different racial contexts that we're presented with on a daily basis. The last thing I would say is that we are living in racially turbulent times, but there is a lot to signal that we are making small advancements on now fertile soil, I believe. And I think what we all need to do is almost get our hands dirty in fertilizing that soil. Historically, it's been for Black and ethnic minority people to try and mobilize that soil on what has actually been toxic soil. But now we have this fertile soil. It's for everyone to kind of take arms and really do their best to kind of bed in those seeds and really nourish them to ensure that we have a racially equitable space that not only, because you know, the eradication of racism is not just for the benefit of Black and ethnic minority people, it's for the benefit of all people if we're really to extol the virtues of the Academy's promise, which is to be a microcosm of society and to be a reflection of what an egalitarian society could perhaps look like. So thank you so much for your time and your ear.